My name is Nikki King, also known as Playincollege3. A really important guest today, and I think she is going to give you an incredible amount of knowledge regarding the recruiting process. Her name is Christy Mooberry. She's been through it all, recruiting at the Division I, Division II, I even think maybe even Division III. But I'm going to let you take the stage, Christy.
Thanks. Yeah, I've coached for about 20 years now. I've done high school, club, and obviously college. I've coached at the Division I level, Division II level, and the NAIA level. I haven't coached at Division III, so that's the one spot that I haven't, that I don't have any experience in. But yeah, so I've coached about 20 years, and it's been a blast, and I feel like it's given me a good handle on recruiting and the whole process, and hopefully being able to help people in that whole process, because it is a crazy process to understand. So
as a player, you went to University of St. Francis in Illinois, which is my hometown, and won 2 conference championships. And tell us a little bit about how your experience as a student athlete shaped who you are today, and how you got into coaching volleyball at the collegiate level.
Yeah. I feel like every experience that you have as an athlete kind of shapes who you're going to be as a coach. They're all learning experiences. So even in high school, I felt like my different coaches kind of fed into my life, and that's really why I decided to pursue coaching. It's the one thing that I was really, really excited about, and I loved being in the gym, and I loved working hard. I loved being in the weight room. I went to St. Francis for 2 seasons, played under Rich Luneman, who, he's in the NCAA Hall of Fame. He's a phenomenal coach. He is very much a student of the game, and so I feel like I learned a lot that, growing up in the Chicago area, it's a hub for volleyball. So you're even at the club level, you're playing higher, and it's a great experience. And then playing for Rich, I feel like really opened my eyes to everything there was with, especially scouting and learning all the different defenses. And I actually transferred to another school up in the Chicago area, and we competed for nationals there, and that was a great experience. And the coach that I had there is also in the Hall of Fame for the division that they're at, but she was very intentional about investing in people, and there's that whole sports ministry thing that comes into play. It's just investing in people. And she actually reached out to me today out of the blue. We keep in contact every now and then, but that was really cool, and it just made me think, she really is great at that intentional people part of it. And I think that really made an impact on me as a player too, as far as what I wanted to be as a coach. So I've been lucky to have some really great people in my life.
Can you touch on the differences from a recruiting standpoint, with your experience, having to recruit high school players from the Division I level, the D2 level, and the NAIA level?
I think it's really, really helpful to have someone like yourself, or a recruiting coordinator for a club that really understands the different levels and understands the timelines, and understands what goes into different programs and different levels. I feel like there's a lot of wiggle room in a lot of these, as far as, being an NAIA school does not mean that you are a really bad volleyball school. There's some really great NAIA schools. They're just governed by a different body, and that changes their recruiting rules and when they can reach out to you. And, that can be confusing for someone who's playing in a tournament and sees a coach talking to someone and thinks, oh, maybe I'm allowed to talk to coaches, but that's an NAIA coach, and they don't have the same rules that an NCAA coach has. And so someone to help you understand all of those things is super helpful. That NAIA coach can reach out to you basically anytime. Well, that NCAA Division I coach can only reach out to you at certain times. There's differences in all of them, and it's not good or bad. It's really like, what's the best fit? And there's pros and cons to all of them. So
what was your strategy? What were you looking for in an athlete?
I was always looking as much as possible to find someone who's a good fit for our school, because I want them to stay for 4 years, because it's a lot of work to recruit and recruit and recruit, and then have them not be a great fit and leave after a year. So I think finding the right fit is a huge part of it. Now, obviously, the other things that have to be there as well, they have to be at the level that's going to keep pushing the program to be better athletically. They have to be a good fit academically. If they're bombing in the classroom, that's a big red flag that it's going to be a lot of work to keep that kid eligible, or maybe they're not a hard worker anyway because they're not doing it in the classroom. So I always would steer away from not great academic kids. So I would say that big one is finding the right fit, and that's all inclusive. That's someone who's going to be happy at your school. So looking at what size school do they want, what location. I would have some kids that are like, yeah, I want to go far away, and then that first, I think it's normal for every freshman to struggle a little bit that first semester, maybe that first year. But some could handle it and some couldn't. So trying to figure out and really talking through what it looks like to be farther away from home. Is it a Christian school? Is it a private school? Is it, are you going to fit in? Or are you going to just feel totally uncomfortable there? Things like that are really big in the recruiting process, I think, too.
Or what impressed you the most by some of the recruits that you've had in the past?
Yeah. I would say the number one thing is the student athletes that had done their research, and in their emails, their contacts, they were very specific about what they were looking for. So they knew your name. They were saying, I'm interested in this about your school. You could tell that they had done their research and they were genuinely interested in your school, versus saying, dear coach, I'm interested in aeronautical engineering. And you're like, great, I don't have that here. Like, why are you emailing me? So either having done the research or, for me, I also would have connections as a coach with recruiting coordinators who would say, hey, this kid's going to be a good fit for your program, or hey, I wouldn't go there. That one's not a great fit for your program. And so having someone like yourself that can, help in that process is always helpful too. So I'd say those two things, having people that I trust that are giving me input, and then also athletes where I could tell they had done the research and they were looking at us for the right reasons.
Yeah. And how did you feel a potential recruit calling you on the phone? Is that something you welcomed?
Yeah, I think it shows that they're genuinely interested. I know it's uncomfortable for a lot of potential student athletes. That age group is not like huge on calling on the phone, but I will say it was also super appreciated whenever they would text you like 10 minutes ahead of time and be like, hey, I'm going to call in 10 minutes. This is so-and-so. So then I could go back and look at my notes, especially with someone I was just starting contact with, and see, because I would take notes on every contact that I had, so that because you're talking to so many people that you can't just keep track of everyone. So that's super helpful to say, hey, I'm going to contact you in 10 minutes. And, sometimes the coach, based on rules, can or can't respond back to that. So, just because a coach doesn't answer doesn't mean that they're not interested. They just might be in the middle of something or, whatever. But I think it shows a good amount of interest, and I think it's a positive step, until you can get some more information from that coach on where they stand about you,
Yeah, awesome. I like that, and I'm definitely going to share that with my current clients.
Yeah.
Give them, text beforehand, give you an opportunity to kind of gather all the information that you need so that you can have a productive call. And it probably wouldn't hurt for them in the text to state what year they're graduating, so that you understand whether or not this is somebody that you even can have a conversation with. But I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are maybe some of the biggest mistakes that potential student athletes may have done that can really turn you off?
When you're at a tournament and you're watching a kid, hands down, I've walked away from good players that give like crappy attitude to their coaches, or I've walked away from some before that were just terrible to their moms. I was like, they're like that to their mom. What are they going to be like when they don't like what I have to say? Because, as a coach, you're like, not everyone's going to love 6 a.m. workouts, or when you say that's not, you need to work harder, they're not going to love you every moment. And so watching them in situations that are challenging or tough, and seeing how they respond to the people around them, whether it's their teammates, their coaches, their parents, I've definitely written kids off because of those interactions, because you want to know that they can handle it in the tough stuff. And it's easy to be positive when everything is going great, but how are they when things aren't going great? And are they that kid that is doing their best to pick up the rest of the team? I've gone after kids that I've been on the court maybe watching someone else. I've just been like, oh my gosh, I love the energy this kid brings. I need to reach out and contact this kid. You never know who's watching, and positive or negative, those things make an impact. So
Sure.
yeah.
And that kind of leads into my next question, which would be about the parents and how important their role is in the recruiting process, but also if you're getting closer to potentially offering a student athlete, I'm going to guess that you're going to be at a lot of games, and you already know who the parents are.
Yeah.
Do you kind of watch the behavior from the parents too, on how they're interacting and from the sidelines?
100%. I'm sure I'm not the only coach that has decided to go a different direction based on what they've seen in parents, because as a coach, less so than high school coaches or club coaches are going to have to deal with it. But, you don't want those parents that are angry with every call and angry every time it doesn't go their way, or, the parent that is complaining about the club coach, or you're like, well, they're going to do the same thing when they're not happy with the decisions that I make. The kid or the parents that, I get it that every parent believes in their kids, and I think that that's a really good thing. It can be a challenging thing when they don't have a realistic evaluation of where their kid is at. The ones that are like, my kid is the next Olympian. You're like, probably not at 5'2" outside hitter, probably not, and that's not to kill the vibe for any shorter players. There's a place for everyone, but it just, as a coach, it makes you leery, because you want to be able to focus on the things that are going to be moving your team forward, and like all the positive things. And if you have, these other things that you're having to deal with because of unrealistic expectations, or someone who's always angry or something like that, it's a red flag to maybe move in a different direction. Whereas, I've had parents that are just phenomenal, that are like, we love the program, what are things that they can work on, and the ones who are in it big picture, and very much more team oriented, those parents are great to have around.
And I tell my families that I work with that this is a family decision, and that it's important for the parents to be involved, but I think there's certain points in the recruiting process when that needs to happen. But I'd love to get your perspective as to the importance of their involvement, and at what point, do they need to kind of I tell my kids all the time, you need to be making the phone calls. I don't want the parents calling the coaches. I mean, maybe further down the line when they're getting ready to make a decision and a scholarship has been offered.
Right.
I'm sure you would be welcoming to that, but if you could just touch on that a little bit, that would be really helpful for me.
Yeah, I think that's really smart on your part. Whenever I get an email or a phone call first from a parent, I would always note that, because it's a red flag to me, that the kid's not doing the work, that the kid isn't necessarily being responsible for their part of the journey. And that scares me a little bit, because it makes me wonder, it just makes me wonder how much of it they're doing themselves. And I really want someone who is proactive and responsible in their part of it. But of course, I want to get to know the family, and I think that's a really important part. So I would say always make sure that the student athlete is reaching out first, and that they're the one responding to emails and answering questions, and that they're the ones calling, that they're showing that they want this themselves, that it's not the parents who want this. And then as you go further, especially if parents have questions and stuff like that, if a student athlete sets it up, hey, my parents have some questions, would you be interested in talking to them? every coach is gonna be like, absolutely. You know, there's some things, financial questions, things like that, or even like, you know, maybe the parent just wants to, you know, what's the crime rate around there? What's the things that parents want to know? Yeah, that's a welcome question. But I want to know that they're taking responsibility first.
So I'm in a situation with some of my 22s and 21s that don't have any footage. Like we've gone through all of the footage that we can of the most updated, and we've sent out videos to their schools of their choice. And without having any video or lack of video, what other ways would you recommend these kids, my followers, to do to keep the engagement with the college coaches so they don't, you know, so they still want to show that they're interested, but yet not bore you to death at the same time? If you have any suggestions on that, that would be great.
Suggestion on that would be, I'm always a fan of short and sweet emails too. As a coach, I was always struggling to get through all of the emails because there's just so many. And so short and sweet isn't bad, you know, that the coaches don't need a novel of what you're doing in the moment. But the little things that you might be doing to be better right now, and I hope that the student athletes are finding little ways to make themselves better. You know, oh wow, they're looking for ways to be better mentally, emotionally, because man, you know, those parts are important parts of being a solid student athlete. I think that those are really good ways to, you know, engage and then just ask questions. So
yeah, I agree. That's great. How important has social media been for you within the recruiting process?
I think social media is obviously always important. I would always look up kids before we would start those conversations. You know, you just got to be really smart about what you're putting out there. Really, really smart. If I see a bunch of like party stuff, and I think it depends on the school you're at, but I don't think anyone is like, oh, it should be something that a coach can look at and say, I would want that person representing our program. So if I see a ton of volleyball pictures and it's obvious that you love playing and you love your team and you love your family, well, that's great, you know? So I think just being smart about what you put out there, so you're not scaring coaches away.
Yeah. And we've, you know, I've talked with a lot of the families that I'm working with about the importance of social media at this time with COVID. It is an opportunity for coaches to really kind of dive in and get to know these kids on a personal level.
Yeah.
So it's great to see a mix of, you know, family outings and maybe a little bit about their dogs or their pets, and things that they might do even outside of volleyball mixed in with volleyball. I do see a lot of kids now starting to have like a personal account that's private, and then like just a volleyball account that's just volleyball. And I kind of like the mix of both because I want to know a little bit more about you as a person too. So I like the mix of show me your volleyball and show some videos and highlights and pictures with your teammates, but I also want to see, you know, what else you do in your life. So I think that's important also. But
what you said is great. I think most coaches want to know their players outside of just volleyball too. So even including some of that in their emails, you know, like I said, it doesn't have to be a novel, but definitely one of my favorite parts of coaching was getting to know the players and not just them on the court. So, you know, it's fun to know who has this hobby or who has this other interest. And so, yeah, I love that idea. That's a great idea.
First and foremost, they send their emails out, the first one initially. I know you as a coach, or you need to identify, okay, A, am I looking for that position in that year? And B, is she physical enough to play at my level?
Right.
So you're not going to read anything else until you get through to those 2 points.
Right.
So on that first email, I recommend to my followers to make it short, sweet, who you are, and a video. And then at that point, you know, once the coach says, yes, you know, I'm interested, or no, I'm not, then you can start filling in the
Yeah.
blanks, the gaps, and start building that rapport. Because you're right. I think our schools, especially now, are probably getting more emails than they ever have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's how do you sit through them all?
Yeah.
And you don't want to get lost in the shuffle by sending a really long
Yes.
on that first one. So I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Yeah. Well, on that note, like you said, you're right. It doesn't matter. Like those things don't really matter if you can't play at that level. I think the video part is so huge. I know when I would be working through email, and I mean, I was on it all the time trying to work through it. But it takes a while when each one you're breaking down like, okay, like, are they a good fit? Do they have it physically? So you're going through the video, and it's so frustrating as a coach if it's like a full video and you have to like wade through it to try to find, I'm probably not going to spend as much time on it unless there's something that grabs me right away. So if you have someone that can edit it down to where like, here's that person and here they are, I don't want just that little, like just you hitting the ball, but like you're approaching into that, and then here's you again, and here's you again, and it makes it easy. That's a huge help, and a very positive thing, I think, for recruiting.
So with the coaching background myself, it drives
Yeah.
me crazy when I'm looking at video and having to evaluate kids that circle themselves for every clip
Yeah.
and pause it for every clip. So the kid might be in the middle of an approach,
Yeah.
and it pauses, and then it arrows or circles them, and then it continues. From a coaching perspective, I can't evaluate anybody that way. Or do you feel the same way?
Yeah. If I am ever helping someone with editing video, I'll take the first couple of seconds before they're doing something and then a little bit after, because I want to see their whole movement. And it's even not just I want to see their like contact with the ball, but I want to see their movement before the ball. I want to see how they're interacting with their team afterwards. But I don't need like 3 minutes of timeout in between there, or I don't need the 3 rotations where you're not on the court, or you know what I mean? So 100% I'm with you. If when I was coaching and I'm watching a video, I can usually slow it down if I really need to slow it down, but I don't really usually need to do that. And so, yeah, like those things are not necessarily helpful. If I know what number you are and it's good enough video where I can see you, and it's like efficient in the video, like there you are, here it is, I don't have to work. Okay, I got to fast forward this next whatever thing, then that's helpful.
So I recommend to the families that I work with and my followers to video from the back end line of the side that your child is actually on. It's really difficult to try and find the player on the other side of the net, and to ensure that the whole court's in view, because I'm looking at you're obviously going to want to evaluate their IQ and how well they see the other court.
Yep.
And it helps when just developing, as the play develops. I think it's important to have that whole court in view. And for my middles, there are clips that I do like to have from the other side, but maybe to the sideline, so I can see like their eye sequence, which I think is really important in evaluating middles. But for the most part, back end line and zoomed up enough where I can read, their jersey number, because if it's too far away, it really becomes difficult to be able to evaluate. And the better quality, I mean, you don't need great quality HD, expensive cameras. It can all be done on your iPhone, and you can get a little tripod that's about eye level. But the high angle coming down is really difficult for me to evaluate. I'm sure for many of you, because we don't coach from way up there. We coach from the ground, right? So that's how we want to see them in these videos. But yeah, if you have any other tips on video editing, that would be great. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it says something that, when we're scouting other programs and we're looking at the ideal place for video is always from the back end line. And I think the same is true for recruiting video, because it does let you see, what they see and the best case scenario, is that you can, because then you can see all of the movement and you can have a better idea of what they see, what they know. Are they just winging it, or do they see the court? Those kind of things. Also, I think it's really good to turn the sound off, because like, I don't want to, the parent commentary isn't necessary. It's great if you're cheering for your kid. Sometimes they're a little bit hilarious. Sometimes they're entertaining, but I would encourage them to turn the sound off too.
Yeah. That's a good point. So what about music then?
I mean, it was always a more of a entertainment joking thing for us in the office. Hey, this kid likes this. They're definitely in, or they're definitely out. You know.
I recommend no music, but I know a lot of you guys, you know, when you're in the gym, or when you're checking your emails, you're on your cell phone. So a lot of times you don't even turn up the volume and listen to that anyways. But that's a good point. In high school, it's difficult if your mom or dad are videoing you while a high school match is going on, because you can't sit on the back end lines. You're usually in the stands on the side. But if they can zoom in, you know, as much as possible, and try to be as deep on the side of the court, as the back end line as possible, even though you're off to the side is a good angle. But for all of the high school coaches out there that might be listening to this, I would highly recommend, if there's an option on Hudle, to zoom in a little bit more on the Hudle footage, because I'm getting a ton of Hudle footage from kids. You know, now they're digging into their high school footage because they ran out of club footage from last year, and it's great. It's a great opportunity, you know, that they've got all of that footage, but it's so far away. They set the camera up really far back so it doesn't get run over by a kid chasing after a ball. But if Hudle has that ability, and if high school coaches can do that, I would recommend zooming in more so that we can see a little bit more of what's going on. That would just be another recommendation of mine. Christy, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate you joining us. I think our followers are going to get a lot out of this.
It's always fun to get to hang out and talk volleyball stuff, right?